I'm Watisse Gathings, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Sisters Talking. Each month, Sisters Talking will bring a cross-generational group of Black women together, creating a safe and brave space for honest and vulnerable discussion about the challenges and opportunities and the fears and strength of being Black women. The goal of Sisters Talking is to amplify and explore the lived experience of Black women, the pain, the joy, success, failure, and the resulting pathways for growth and self-discovery. Over the next several months, an incredible group of Black women will join me on this film journey of conversation and community, self-awareness, and self-actualization. DeAndre Anderson, Chief Operating Officer. Dee Atkins, Chief of Community Engagement. Dr. Suzette McKinney, Life Science and Real Estate Executive. Mary Morton, CEO. Victoria Rudd, Senior Community Affairs Manager. And last but certainly not least, nonprofit executive Nidra Sims-Fears. Let's continue the journey together. Ladies, hi. Thank you guys so much for being here with us again today.
I'm Curtis Tarver, inviting you to tune in to the next Brothers Talking, when the brothers and I talk about Black male sexuality, myths, shame, and liberation.
Being with my wife, intimacy doesn't equate to sex. Intimacy is being able to open up and say, I'm hurting.
Join the conversation Tuesday at 7 p.m. on CAN TV, cable channel 19, or stream online at cantv.org or the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
They say television is about sitting back. We say it's about stepping up. Your block has stories worth telling. Your neighbors have voices worth hearing. Chicago has a heartbeat worth sharing. Stop watching their world. Start showing yours. It's time to tune in and be seen. CAN TV, always here, always yours. Experience the power of community television.
This month, we're taking on a deeply rooted and often uncomfortable conversation, one that has shaped how many Black women see themselves and how they are seen by the world. Colorism. The bias that favors lighter skin tones over darker ones is a form of discrimination that has existed within and beyond our communities for generations. It shows up in beauty standards, media representation, dating preferences, workplace dynamics, and even in how young women see and understand how to value themselves. But this conversation isn't about blame, it's about truth, history, and healing. Why does colorism still have such a power in shaping identity, opportunity, and self-worth? How do we dismantle it with uplifting every shade of Black womanhood? And what does it look like to move from true solidarity and self-love? This month, the sisters and I are ready to unpack the painful history and the path forward when it comes to colorism amongst Black women. Sisters, let's get into it. All right, we have a lot to talk about today, and I'm so excited to get all of your perspective. But maybe we'll just start with a question to ground ourselves. And maybe each of you can just tell me a little bit about your experience with colorism and when did you realize it was actually a thing amongst Black women? We'll start with you, Ms. Nidra.
So my family, there's four of us. I have an identical twin, a brother who's 1 year older than me, and then my sister who's 10 years older than I. And we range from very dark to very light. And so my brother went to kindergarten and came back and he was in tears because someone called him a name, Black boy. And they were really denigrating his I think of him as chocolate, a chocolate coloring. And so that was really my first experience with colorism as he was 5, so I must have been 4, and how upset he was that he was treated so poorly, not based on who he was, what he did, but what he looked like. Because in our family, we never differentiated based on color. It was on who you are and what you valued and how you expressed yourself. It was not about what you look like. It was your content of your character.
Interesting. DeAndre?
I had that first experience in first grade. I went to a Catholic school that was a mixed race school, but majority black, and the black kids wouldn't let me play with them because I looked white. And so I also have an array of colors in my family, and that had not been an issue that I'd encountered. And as a result, there was a young black girl that essentially started bullying me starting in first grade because I claimed to be black and she said, no, you're white.
Wow, we got to spend some time unpacking that. You often hear about colorism going in the opposite direction, but it sounds like your experience was uniquely different. Dee, tell us about your first time with colorism.
Sure. So I'll set the stage a little bit for my portion of this, and it's that I went through most of my very young life just being a little black girl. That's what I was called in my family. She's a pretty black girl. And it wasn't until sophomore year in high school that there was this boy who was very popular in our high school and was much darker skinned than I was. And he was known as a bully, or it was because of who he was or how popular he was,
Sure.
that people would laugh at anything he said because you wanted to be sort of liked by him, if you can imagine that.
Sure.
But in this crowd of our peers, he called me black. And it was the way that he said it that I understood exactly what he meant, because we were all black in the school. But him saying black meant to me that I was darker than most. And I giggled it off, but that ripped me apart. Now, prior to that in my life, I was never concerned about the color of my skin tone. It was never really pronounced in my family. I never felt anything. But when he said that to me, I carried that for years, that darkness of my skin. And I found myself trying to seek validation in how dark my skin is, and also prejudging some situations or second guessing myself because of the skin tone. And so the name wasn't colorism. I didn't recognize it as a name or a thing. But we know now today it's colorism. But if I think back to the moment in which I had that first experience, it was around age 15.
Wow. Mary?
Well, I remember going away to sleepaway camp when I was probably 12 or 13, and my mother saying, please stay out of the sun. You don't need to get any darker. And so that was the first time as I thought back about this question, that I thought, okay, so staying in the sun, getting darker is not good. Okay. And then when I was a little bit older, there used to be this guy who would deliver stuff to our house on a regular basis, and he was very, very dark skinned. And we were kind of flirting a little bit, and my mother said, oh no, you will not have anything to do with him. Imagine what your children would look like if you actually connected with him. And so those were the times when, just like Dee said, didn't know what it was called, didn't know what it was, but it was made very clear that I did not want to be with anyone who was too dark.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tori?
When I first, the question, it has made me think, like, when have I truly had my own personal experience with it? Because I think a lot of times I've seen other people experience it, or I can remember in high school, it was you're acting like a light-skinned individual, or you're acting dark-skinned, or maybe even some men may have experienced that in greater kind of tones. But I think my first kind of experience with it was really learning about it, and that really didn't happen until college. So kind of hearing your stories has been very like, wow, like I did not go through that. And as I speak with friends, the topic doesn't really come up as maybe as it is right now. So it's very interesting for me to have an experience learning and listening to how this has affected other people's lives.
You just described the power of having a multi-generational table, essentially, right? To understand how this conversation has progressed over the course of time, because my experience is very similar to yours.
So, like many of the other ladies at the table, in my family, there's a wide range of skin tones, from relatives that are biracial and therefore very lighter skin complected, all the way to those of us that are darker. I would say in elementary school and early high school, there was an experience there, but I didn't know what it was. It didn't have a name.
Right.
But it basically manifested itself in the sense that the boys only wanted to have girlfriends that were light-skinned. You know, that was the term that they used. It wasn't until toward the end of high school, it still didn't have a name, but the impact was greater. And that came in the form of having a conversation about going away to college and pledging a sorority or a fraternity, and then this concept of the brown paper bag test came up. And I said, well, what is that? And they said, well, you know, here's the paper bag. If you're lighter than the paper bag, you're good, you'll get in. If you're darker than the paper bag, you will not get in, and that is not good. And that was my first real experience of someone telling me that I may not be considered good based on the complexion of my skin.
Wow, that's super interesting. And my experience, I would say, is a lot like Tori's, where I had to search to understand what the difference was. I can go back to my childhood, and I think I shared on the previous show, I think my mother had a masterful way of preparing me for the world without actually sharing what she was preparing me for. And so I grew up in a family of a lot of boys, and boys will be boys. They used to terrorize, it was me and my girl cousin, they used to terrorize us, right? Taking our toys and chasing us around the house and doing all the things that you would expect, brothers or siblings to do. And every once in a while, there'll be a comment about us being blackity black or whatever that was, but I was always in the middle. I wasn't as dark as my girl cousin, so she would receive the brunt of those jokes in particular. But then they would also tell me all the time that I was acting light-skinned because I was the more sensitive of the two, where I would, cry or go tell or be a snitch or whatever they would call us. And so we got it from that angle. But we also knew that when we went out into the world, the boys knew to protect the girls. So we never really heard it outside of her house until my family moved to Arizona. And being in an all-black environment growing up on the South Side was much different living in Arizona. My brother was actually called the N-word based off the color of his skin for the first time. And that's when I knew that there was a difference and people did view color and skin tone as something that was super interesting. But I never had that personal encounter. Now, you said something about the brown paper bag that was interesting to me, because I saw a lot of heads around the table start to nod. Have anyone else heard of the brown paper bag test, and how was it applied for you guys growing up?
I went to Kenwood, and so I grew up in Chatham. I went to Kenwood, and there was always this kind of, let's say, emphasis on black kids who came from Chatham versus the black kids who grew up in Hyde Park. And there was kind of a notion of the black kids from Chatham knew that they were black, where the Hyde Parkers kind of didn't know that they were black. And I remember that the Hyde Park kids had a party, and you were not going to get an invitation if you didn't pass the paper bag test. Wow. And that was my first introduction to this. There's a book called Our Kind of People, and they talk about, you summer in You summer in Harvard, and it's this whole kind of stratification of upper income black people, and that they are very colorism plays a significant role, or it can play a significant role, and I saw that played out in Hyde Park when I went to Kenwood.
Wow. What's interesting about what you said is you hinted towards colorism and the connectivity to classism or proximity to power. And so I have to believe that, across our generations, there's different experiences with colorism, that it didn't start with us. So what's your perspective around how has colorism shown up in history well before even individuals at this table were thought about?
Well, I think what we know is history has shown us that people who were perceived to be darker skinned were darker because they worked outside and in the fields, and people who were not darker were wealthy and did not have to work outside in the fields. And that has carried on for generations up to and through slavery, and has become a part of our own vision of ourselves as it relates to colorism.
But I want to say that if you look historically, the African continent has the greatest ethnic diversity in the continent compared to the entire world. And so that fulcrum of kind of height and weight and color is already there in Africa, so that I don't know if the proximity to whiteness, but I would say that from a biology point of view, that range of color has been there for a very, very long time. But to your point, there is a status of not working in the field, of being in the palace, in the house, and so that does get to be bound up in that. I think of Cleopatra, right? Cleopatra means the beautiful one, you know, and so, and when you look at Egyptian paintings, they have this range of different skin tones, so.
Wow. Why do you think it still has such a stronghold?
Well, I think that as Black Americans, we've been traumatized by this whole concept that white is right and Black is not. And that somehow throughout history has really been, and I actually heard someone say this today, believe it or not, that's been ingrained in our DNA. And so when you mentioned at the start of the show that it shows up in the beauty industry, it shows up in media, it shows up in retail. Honestly, it shows up anywhere and everywhere. So how many of us will buy designer clothes as opposed to, you know, the Black-owned apparel line because we think it's better somehow? And I think that that's just a long-standing trauma that we have not been able to overcome.
Yeah, even in our regular comment, black sheep, black fry, black.
That's
Yes.
right. That's
You
right.
know, there are so many connotations to the word black being negative, even in regular conversation that we've adopted and we don't even think about. But it is all part of the psyche.
Yeah. Even how it shows up in modern day technology. I mean, have you ever gone to wave your hand under a sink to get the water
yes.
to come?
Very
It doesn't-
difficult.
It's very difficult,
Very
right?
difficult.
So colorism also, it shows up in these very real,
That's
tangible ways that have a negative effect on day-to-day life.
That's right. And you know, we do work in my company around equity and racial equity. And one of the words that we try never to use is minority. And we don't use it because minority is only in relation to majority. And the majority is always white. So everything is compared to the white standard. And it's really meant that we've had a lot of internalized racism at the end of the day. Yeah.
Wow. Dr. Suzette, you started to touch a little bit on media, and I went to a comedy show this past weekend, and one of the questions the comedian asked the audience is like, what is a deeply held belief that you're willing to stand on, basically, to spark a debate in the audience? And the response that the woman gave, which I didn't even know was a thing, was that light-skinned Aunt Viv was better than dark-skinned Aunt Viv when you go back to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And if you think about that growing up, if you guys have never watched the show Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, at a certain point in its history, they switched out the mother or the aunt of the show, and Viv, and one was light-skinned and one was dark-skinned. But even just hearing them compare the content of those two characters, it was about light-skinned Aunt Viv being better than dark-skinned Aunt Viv, and that being an unpopular opinion. So when we talk about like media and the role that has played, you know, I was fortunate to grow up at a time where I had a plethora of Black shows to look at and get positive image. But as I reflect on it and think about things like Sister Sister or the shows I watched as a young girl, it often reflected very light-skinned women or lead actresses that really did have an impact on the way you looked and the way you showed up. And so maybe I'll pause there and say, how does media and entertainment play a role in how we view ourselves as Black women?
Oh yeah, we had good times. We didn't have that. And on Good Times, it was the Black struggle They always had a little bit of hope, and just when James was about to get a job and move them out of the projects, something happened.
Yeah.
And it had a lot to do with colorism. We didn't see it at the time, but those are the kinds of shows we saw.
And even if you think about sort of film noir or the movies from back in the day, the person that comes to mind is Hattie McDaniels, but people may know her as Mammy. And she was a dark-skinned black woman. So it wasn't so much that they wouldn't create a space, but you are going to take a role that fits your skin tone.
Right.
And for her, when they were talking, you were talking about people working in the fields and those that were lighter skin tone having access to the house. There was a certain part of the house that they had access to if they were light skin versus dark skin. And having darker skin, you may have tended to the children or been cooked in the kitchen.
Yeah.
You were rarely seen versus being out front when company is here, maybe your lighter skin tone servants were seen and able to serve. So even in the media at the start of films being created, the foundation was set for darker skinned people to be perceived as having certain roles that were not as significant of their lighter counterparts. Even though they're the same ethnicity, we're still showing a division in that, which has continued to present day.
And there's some current shows, or more current shows that I think about. The Wonder Years, which Fred Savage was in for a number of years, now has redone that entire sitcom with an all-black cast. And I think Lee Daniels is one of the executive producers. And the entire family is dark-skinned. And it's a lovely thing. And they're going through, I think it takes place in the 60s probably, and 60s, 70s, and you see them trying to get involved with certain groups, like a group that's probably similar to the Lynx or Jack and Jill for the children. The mother wants to do that, but she also is darker skinned, and oh my God, she works. So they're not sure if she can be part of that group. But you really see this very different take on what it means to be a black family in the 60s and 70s, and the entire group, the entire family is dark skinned. And so media is extraordinarily powerful. And when people want to do what I consider to be the right thing, they can do it.
Sure.
That's true. I was thinking about what DeAndrea said about Good Times. And you're so right. So that prompted me to sort of try and jog my memory and see if I could think of another example of another show that we had. And what came to mind for me was the very first show where I saw a young black woman who was free in her body and felt free to move through the world the way she wanted to move through the world was Irene Cara in Fame.
Fame.
You remember that?
show.
Yes.
Oh, that was my song.
She was so free and so self-assured, but her classmate, Leroy, darker skin, struggled.
Yep.
That was the example that came to mind for me. So talk about a juxtaposition,
Yeah.
you know? But as I thought about it, I was thinking, was that really the first time that I actually saw a black character on television sort of feel free, be free, and not experience some of the negative connotations that we're talking about? And that's what I came up with.
Yeah. Even the Jeffersons.
Yeah.
With Tom. And I mean, it was there. It was there in everything that we saw in the media. It fully supported segregation, the separation, all of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you talk about where it came from and why it's so pervasive. I think that goes back to what I was saying, the trauma of it all historically, but these messages have continued to exist and persist.
Sure. You know what's interesting is colorism still has such a prominent place within families, and oftentimes trying to spark conversations about it or even sharing experiences. I think it'd be very hard for some of us to share with our own families, what your experience was like coming up as a child, and them hearing how your interactions with colorism made them feel, especially if it was done at the hand of a family member. How might we start to turn those conversations, given there's a baseline understanding amongst us as Black people as to how painful these conversations could be? Why don't you think we do better amongst each other? Why is it so uncomfortable to talk about?
It's not uncomfortable for me to talk about it. And I will say I'm one of the, my family has a range of shades. I'm on the one of the more darker skinned family members. It's interesting that we're even having this conversation, but because I knew it was coming up, I had two separate conversations, one with my mom, who is more fair-skinned, and my husband, who is also fair-skinned, about colorism and their experience. And my mom was like, what is that? And we had this conversation. She had no idea that I had this experience, because it's not something that you talk about.
Right.
So she had no idea that I had experienced this, or that I spent years feeling not seen because I was dark, or also hiding in the shadows because of my darkness. So wanting to be seen in a way, but also not wanting to be seen, if that makes sense. So we had this whole conversation around, baby, I had no idea that you felt that way. And my husband, the same thing. He didn't understand what that is. And I think it's because if you're not darker skinned, it's not your experience. So why would you notice it? And my husband said to me, well, I did recognize you as a dark skinned woman and you were fine and all that, but nothing else.
I'm sorry.
But nothing else for him came to mind. He just saw my beauty and that was it. But sometimes you second guess, like, well, does he really, like, why you're lighter, why me? And that stems from like the 15-year-old D.
Sure.
Who's carrying that trauma and second guessing someone's love based on the tone of my skin, when that's the farthest thing from their mind. So it's not difficult to have the conversation. It's just not something that's widely talked about. So I've got some work to do, to bring it up. And then the last thing that I'll say about this is, one of my aunts has always called me till today, hey, black girl. And sometimes I struggle with that, because she admires me and my success, but it stings a little because of 15-year-old D that's taking it, and she's coming from a place of love, tender, loving care for her niece. But sometimes I just have to grapple with, well, where is this really coming from? And you're talking to a grown, successful woman who is just speaking to her experience as a darker skinned person.
Y'all are hitting all the triggers. My cousins call me white girl. Now, I don't care, because I know who they are and they love me. Right. But you also hit on something when you said that your brothers or your cousins might say you're acting light skinned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, my whole life I have acted tough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I fight with the boys. I'm tough at work. I'm tough in negotiations. I'm tough in everything. And a lot of that has to do with me proving to myself that I am a black woman.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that someone in your family calls you black girl. My cousins call me white girl, and it doesn't faze me because it's them. But let me go outside and somebody call me that. I'm ready to fight.
I'm Curtis Tarver, inviting you to tune in to the next Brothers Talking, when the brothers and I talk about black male sexuality, myths, shame, and liberation.
Being with my wife, intimacy doesn't equate to sex. Intimacy is being able to open up and say, I'm hurting.
Join the conversation Tuesday at 7 p.m. on CAN-TV, cable channel 19, or stream online at cantv.org or the CAN-TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
They say television is about sitting back. We say it's about stepping up. Your block has stories worth telling. Your neighbors have voices worth hearing. Chicago has a heartbeat worth sharing. Stop watching their world. Start showing yours. It's time to tune in and be seen. Can TV, always here, always yours. Experience the power of community television.
Cable cord cutting, funding rollbacks, growing efforts to silence community voices. The stakes have never been higher for a community television station. Since 1983, CAN-TV has proudly served as Chicago's home for truth, access, and accountability. From City Hall to your front door, we make sure your story is told. But to keep it local and to keep it real, we need you. Please visit cantv.org and donate today. The future of Chicago's voice is in your hands.
So it's interesting, you segmented a little bit into the workplace, and obviously I've heard many stories from women with extra melanin in their skin about the way that shows up in the workplace, but I don't think I've ever asked a lighter skinned woman what that has meant for you, because I have to imagine that a lot of your success is attributed to the fact that you are white appearing for some versus it being about your actually ability to drive and get the work done. So how has that shown up for you in the workplace?
I will tell you, a career that I had for a long time, when I started that career, when I went in for the interview, I was fully licensed already. I had already gone to grad school. And at the end of the interview, the head of this department said, "Your resume looks great, you have great experience, and you certainly have the right look." And I thought, what does that mean? I didn't know if he actually meant, you're a black girl and we need one of those, or you look professional, or exactly what it meant. In hindsight, I get it. I get what it means. It meant that he got to cross, check the box, but with somebody that looked more like women that he obviously thought were attractive. And so because of that, though, I'm constantly studying and doing my work. And, a lot of that has to do with me proving I didn't get here because I'm light-skinned. I don't want to pass the light-skin test. I'm a black woman. And what's interesting is that you married a fair-skinned man. I married a dark-skinned man. I didn't want my kids to be light-skinned.
Because of your experience?
I didn't. I wanted them to be accepted by their own people and not have that struggle too.
And just on the flip, it's amazing that you say that, because on the flip side of that, my son is 8 now, but when he was born, he came out your complexion. And there was a part of me that was like, thank you, Jesus. Because I did not want him to have the dark skin experience that I lived through. So it's something else.
It's the trauma
But
that you
even
were
that-
referring to. It's the trauma that it just continues, and you're wishing, right? You're of course happy to have a wonderful, healthy son,
absolutely.
but for a moment, it all comes back constantly. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. These ideals and these thoughts, this is ingrained throughout our history. My family is from the South, and so I'm not sure about the rest of you, but in our family, when a baby would be born and they'd be very light-skinned, the older people in the family, especially the women, would say, look at the ears, look at the ears, because typically the ears would be a different shade than the face and the body, but that was a sign of the child, what the complexion would be that the child would have as they got older.
Right.
And again, it goes back generations,
Absolutely.
hundreds and
Absolutely.
hundreds of
It does.
years.
A person in my family, when I met my husband, said, I hope she marries this one because they're getting darker and darker.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Luckily, I actually liked him. But yeah, it's deeply ingrained, and it's both ways.
But it also, I think, accompanies this idea around good hair and how you
Yes.
speak. I remember in college, a friend's mother called and said, "Who was that white girl who answered the phone?" It was like, wow, because I spoke in a particular way, and so it's all that, right? It's how you look, it's how you show up. We have internalized all of that, all of that self-hatred in many ways.
Yeah.
I also think that it should be noted that one of the reasons why maybe conversations like this do not happen within Black communities because it challenges our own self-accountability and how do we show up as oppression is happening, because at the end of the day, colorism is a form of oppression. And I think that specifically for Black people, we kind of use that against one another. So if we bring up the conversation, now I have to answer to someone else about what is my participation in that, and have I truly accepted and done the reflection of, have I stayed the course and like been an advocate of this, or have I done the complete opposite and perpetuated some of these stereotypes?
Well, I have two daughters, to your point, and very conscious of colorism and didn't want to go there. So my daughter looked at me as an adult and she says, people don't talk about skin color as food, because I would say that I'm peanut butter brown, she was sugar cookie brown, someone else was ginger snap brown, and when we talked about that, it just kind of got rid of all of that otherism, and that's what I wanted. But my husband is fair, and he comes from a family that goes from fair, very fair, and so it's just really interesting the dynamics between the two families and how they kind of exist in the world. But I have never heard about Black or light-skinned personality traits. That's a new one for me. So.
Yeah, and I think it seems as though guys get that a little bit more than women when it comes down to dating in particular. But maybe if we can just stay on the topic of healing and accountability within our families. When we think about healing and kind of seeing yourself as you're supposed to see yourself, or as how God sees you if you're a person of faith, what do you think it's going to take? Like, what are the type of self rituals that you've done, Dee, to help overcome some of the challenges as it relates to your skin tone? I know historically, when I was younger, we had, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice, right? And you had that song, and now you have, Beyonce's Brown Skin Girl and so many other kind of empowering songs that folks listen to, and I have those all on my playlist, especially in time of social unrest where your class and your race seem to be under attack. But what are some of the rituals that you all do around the table to really make sure you're not becoming a part of the oppression and really reinforcing for yourselves and the beauty about being Black?
Well, I can say the turning point for me was this woman at my church. Her name was Helen Hudson. She was a beautiful, dark-skinned woman like me, had a gold tooth in the front. I mean, I lived for her. She was fashionable, everything. And I was headed off to college, and she said, "You are just so beautiful, and I want you to know that." And not that had anyone else said that it didn't matter, but it mattered so much more because it came from a woman who looked like me, I mean in skin tone.
Yeah.
For her to validate me in such a way and send me on to sort of the next phase of my life felt just so refreshing, and it was a confidence booster. Because again, I held those years in high school of carrying that weight of being called Black in a way that I couldn't articulate to her what she said and how it transformed my life. And she's not here today for me to tell her how much that meant to me. But I really found that helpful. But there were no special affirmations or anything that I did. I can walk in a room and work a room now.
All right.
And but it just, sometimes it amazes me that I carried that, I carry that. Now there are still glimmers of it that I still carry, like the birth of my son. And you're in a delivery room with this blessing saying, "Thank you, Jesus." Yeah. He's not, dark skinned. But never again in the way that I carried that weight for all of those years. So there are affirmations that I can offer, but there are none that I've said to myself to sort of build me up.
Wow.
I think for me, the awareness of colorism came from being out in the world, you know, in society. Like I said, I was having a conversation with friends and there was a parent there and we started talking about this brown paper bag test because that particular parent had been put through the brown paper bag test. I would say within my family, it was never a discussion as I was growing up. And so when I raised my family, it wasn't a discussion. What I realize now, as I have thought about it and reflected about it, primarily in preparation for this conversation, what I realized about myself is that it's sort of just been there in the background, but I haven't really been affected by it. I mean, when I was younger and the boys only wanted to date the lighter skinned girls, my thought was, well, fine, you're just not good enough for me. But now, as an adult, I embrace my complexion. I'm not bothered by it at all. I will have friends often say to me in the summer, anyone who knows me knows that I love the summer. Yes. I love being outside in the sun. And every chance I get, I'm gonna try and tan. Mm-hmm. And friends will say, are you tanning again? Yes, because you missed one. The comedians say, black, black, blackety black.
Blackety black, that's right.
And, you know, in the summer, because I just love being outside and I love the sun, I'm just out in the sun. So I'm not concerned about going inside. The reaction that I get from strangers is, I mean, it's so crazy good that it shocks me. Like, I was walking downtown Chicago a couple of weeks ago, and I was going to a meeting, but it was at a hotel. And as I approached the door, the bellman sort of stepped toward me and he stopped me. And he said, I'm sorry, I just have to stop you. You know, it looks like you're on your way somewhere, but we have a city code and you are in violation of the code. And I'm looking like, well, what did I do? Because I'm just walking down the street. He said, you are too beautiful. And I mean, I don't know. He could have been a line. It could have been a line. It could have been him being cheeky. It could have been any number of things. I mean, obviously, I just, you know, accepted the compliment, thanked the gentleman, and continued on my way. But fortunately, I have not been traumatized by someone speaking about my complexion in the negative sense. Right. And I think that has been one of the things that has also helped me to embrace it and not be concerned about spending a lot of time in the sun. Mm-hmm. I spend as much time in the sun as I can get.
With sunscreen, of course.
With sunscreen,
right.
of course. Absolutely.
You know what's interesting is you just talked about, you know, the gentleman as you're walking down the street, you hit on the 15-year-old boy that said less than kind words. You guys both talked about your partners. What role do you guys think finding partners, and men in particular, given their opposite sex, and maybe they don't care as much about physical appearance and identity as women often do, what role has that played in shaping how you see yourself, and how have you had to filter your beauty through the lens of your partners?
I don't believe I've had to filter my beauty. I think my husband and I were genuinely attracted to each other. I don't believe that. And we don't talk about skin color. We just genuinely love each other. It's not a skin color thing. It's just not something that comes up in our marriage. Now, I have seen some very interesting things being with a man like that. We've gone to a bar, he go to one side, I go to the other. He pays $25 for a drink, I pay $15 for the same drink. We have seen it play out in other ways, but it's not an issue in our marriage.
Interesting.
Your question made me think about something completely different.
Go ahead, let us know, Doc.
Well, you know, I don't know. I feel like I'm always the rabble-rouser of the group.
We need to be rebelled.
Well,
Roused.
the thought that came to mind for me is, why do we have so many professional athletes and entertainers and people that are in the public eye, if you will, that choose either lighter complected black women, or let's just go there. They go all the way. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it just, when you ask the question, it made me wonder, what is that?
Sure.
Is there,
it's a thing.
It's a thing.
That we have to be honest
but
about.
why is it a thing? You know, and
back to the trauma.
back to the trauma, because I think it is so prevalent now that it asks the question, does this go beyond personal preference? And is it something else, such as the trauma? That's what I thought about when you asked the question.
Do you
Apologies
remember
for the
years ago
rebel rousing.
when Wesley Snipes came out and said his preference was for white women and light-skinned women years ago?
Wow.
Because he was that guy, you know. He was talented, and everybody thought he was super attractive. And he said that many years ago, and we were all like, preference. It was an interesting comment for the time, and it still exists today.
Wow. You know, I think one of the things about this conversation that I always take away from our discussions together is just our ability to do better for the generations coming behind us. I think that, you know, now that we have language such as colorism to actually anchor to it and name it when we see it, you know, how might we cultivate the young women coming behind us to not have these same experiences? Obviously, we are making progress in areas like media representation or being able to point to a prominent, beautiful African-American woman that we can admire and look up to, but we could still admit that when we look in all spaces, the representation often isn't there, and we still have a long way to go. So what is it that we can do to make sure that this conversation does not continue to be the cycle of crippling and breaking Black women as they try to grow and flourish in who they are, but can be bold and confident about themselves?
I think it's the awareness piece that you were mentioning, that we have to be aware, we have to be accountable. When I am putting together a video for a client partner, I am really intentional about who's in the video. When we do our workshops, it's always a multiracial team. I'm thinking about who's showing up in the room, who's going to be the audience, if you will. And again, just trying to set examples and having these conversations. Why can't we have these conversations? Why don't we start them? It's not necessarily going to be easy, but for the reasons that you've just stated, we really have to do it.
Yeah, I think asking our question to ourselves about what is really important to me. What is it that triggers me when somebody calls me something other than who I think I am?
Sure.
And once I figure that out, what are my core values, then I can manage those triggers better. If I am happy with who I am, once I figure that out, it doesn't matter what people say. I used to want to fight when somebody called me a white girl. Now I'm like, whatever. I don't know you, you're not relevant.
That's right. I'm never going to see you again.
Yeah.
I would say affirmations as well. Dee, as you tell your story, I think back to the amount of times as a little girl, a woman who was not a part of my family, when they would compliment me, it was like, oh my God, so I'm pretty? Like, really? Like, I hear from my mom all the time, but like, you? I don't even know you.
Right.
So I think as it relates to, and you're not pretty for a Black girl, you're just pretty.
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
when you see a little Black girl with like puffs, knowing what natural hair means in our community, compliment the puffs.
Yeah.
So I think that there are just some things that you can do any kind of time that you see younger generations, just to help lift them up.
I want to say my work. I advocate for Black neighborhoods in the South Side of Chicago, and one of the reasons why I do that is because I grew up in Chatham, and I also Avalon Park, Auburn Gresham, and Greater Grand Crossing, and it was a safe place where I could be Black and I could be affirmed, and I grew up, got married, moved into a predominantly white community, and I didn't know that white people could be racist to a 3-year-old, my 7-year-old, my 9-year-old, and that I do my work because I want to make sure that Black people have a safe space to grow up and be themselves before they have to take on that colorism and racism in a predominantly white community. Not saying that all white people are racist and hurtful, but you don't expect to see that kind of behavior early on. And so that is how I show up and do my work, so that we can be ourselves, and then, you know, with that armor of being told that you're beautiful, that you're bright, that you're talented, that you're loved, that you're affirmed, that you know who you are. When you go out into the world, you are you have that armor, as opposed to having to fight at 1 and 3 and 7 about what you are not.
Yeah. That's what I got from attending an HBCU. To be able to compete freely without anybody worrying about the color of my skin.
Wow. And I think that is the power of predominantly black spaces, where you can just be yourself and not have to worry about all the other things that's required of you to keep up.
Can I say one other thing? I would say, first and foremost, I really appreciate the vulnerability that Dee and DeAndrea have shown today, because they clearly had situations and things happen that directly affected them. And I think, as I think about this next generation, what occurs to me is that, and this goes back to the accountability piece that Tori was talking about, what occurs to me is that for those of us that have experienced sort of adverse situations because of our skin tone, what we can do is not to do the same thing to younger people that are coming behind us. And I think if every single one of us, not just those of us sitting around this table, but across the black community who have experienced these issues related to complexion, remember how it made you feel. And don't do that to someone else, especially a younger person.
And I would say, and to tell people to stop it.
Yes.
To stop it.
Right.
This is
Interrupt
not
it.
acceptable in
Interrupt
my
it.
house, in my workplace, in my church. We do not say those things, and to stop it.
Well, that's the accountability piece,
Exactly.
right? Just to interrupt it and disrupt it, and just make sure that people understand, at least in that space, that's not okay.
Or if I could be a Helen Hudson
Please do.
to another, young person and affirm them in the way that they did. But I also want to just say this in closing, that I went to our class reunion, class picnic this year, and the now man that called me black all those years ago, he hugged me so tight and was like, "You were always a banger." And I was like, "Wait, you never thought so?" He said, "I probably had a crush on you and I didn't know how to tell you." So it's just interesting the way that I took that and carried that. Initially, when I mentioned that, he'd forgotten all about it.
Of course.
I was the one carrying that.
Yeah.
He had no idea. But in retrospect, he said, "I probably just liked you."
All right, so if we don't learn nothing else from our table today, ladies, we know that D has and always will be T, according to this, according to this young man. So congratulations, I'm glad he finally came around. But thank you guys so much for being around the table and having this conversation with me. It's always refreshing to hear about the experiences that we have, especially across generations. And hopefully we all leave this place motivated to do it better for the next generation together.
I'm Curtis Tarver, inviting you to tune in to the next Brothers Talking, when the brothers and I talk about black male sexuality, myths, shame, and liberation.
Being with my wife, intimacy doesn't equate to sex. Intimacy is being able to open up and say, "I'm hurting."
Join the conversation Tuesday at 7 p.m. on CAN-TV, cable channel 19, or stream online at cantv.org or the CAN-TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
They say television is about sitting back. We say it's about stepping up. Your block has stories worth telling. Your neighbors have voices worth hearing. Chicago has a heartbeat worth sharing. Stop watching their world. Start showing yours. It's time to tune in and be seen. CAN TV, always here, always yours. Experience the power of community television.
So as we close this edition of Sisters Talking, may we all remember, our color is not our competition, it's our connection. And the work to dismantle colorism starts with every mirror, every message, and every moment we choose to affirm our sisters and ourselves. That's our time this month, ladies, but fear not, the sisters and I will be coming back to the table next month for another hour of conversation and community. Thank you for making space for CAN TV and Sisters Talking in your day. I'm Watis Gathings. Until next time, protect your peace and remember that black is beautiful. All shades.